During the Second World War, survival didn't just happen on the battlefield. It also happened in kitchens, cellars, and pantries. Families on both the Allied and Axis home fronts were forced to stretch supplies during years of rationing and shortages. With imports cut, farms disrupted, and supply chains constantly under attack, civilians had to become experts at stockpiling food that would last not just weeks but years. Many of the strategies they relied on are just as practical today for anyone thinking about long-term food security. These weren't luxuries. They were the difference between hunger and survival. Looking back at the foods families stored in wartime teaches us not just about resilience in the 1940s, but also about timeless lessons in preparation. One of the most critical wartime staples was flour. Bread was the backbone of nearly every diet, and while fresh loaves might go stale quickly, flour stored in sealed tins or sacks lasted for years if kept dry. Families also stockpiled oats, barley and cornmeal, which could be turned into porridge, biscuits or flatbreads. These grains were calorie-dense, versatile, and could be stretched further with fillers like potatoes or powdered milk when supplies were tight. Protein was among the hardest nutrients to come by during rationing, and beans filled that gap. Dried beans and lentils lasted for years in storage and provided a reliable source of energy and protein when meat was scarce. Families who prepared well often had sacks of beans stored in their basements or attics, knowing they could be boiled into soups, mashed into spreads, or stretched with vegetables to create hearty meals for the entire family. Meat rationing hit households hard, which made canned goods invaluable. Spam, corned beef, and tinned fish such as sardines and salmon became central to wartime diets. They were designed to last for years without refrigeration, and while not glamorous, they delivered much-needed protein and fat. Canned fish also brought omega-rich nutrition at a time when fresh catches were often diverted to the military. Many families developed recipes that disguised the repetitive taste of tinned meats, mixing them into pies or stews. Milk was heavily rationed, and children were often prioritized for fresh supplies. Families relied on evaporated and powdered milk to meet daily needs. Powdered milk could be rehydrated for cooking, while evaporated milk added richness to sauces and baking. These products could last for years unopened, making them a perfect stockpile item. For households, it meant children could still have some form of milk long after the fresh supply had run out. Sugar was another rationed luxury, and it became a high-value commodity. Families stockpiled what they could and often turned to honey or syrups as substitutes. Sugar was not only vital for sweetening scarce desserts, but also for preserving fruit in jams and chutneys. Honey, with its natural antibacterial properties, could last indefinitely, making it one of the most valuable foods in any wartime pantry. Salt was more than just seasoning during WWII, it was a preservative. Families kept large sacks of salt not only for flavouring but for curing meat and fermenting vegetables. Its ability to extend the shelf life of fresh produce made it essential in every household, and it remains just as important for modern preparedness. Hot drinks were a real morale booster, as much as, a dietary staple. Real coffee and tea were scarce, so families would stockpile what they could, often rationing it ever so carefully. When supplies finally ran out, roasted barley, chicory, or even ground acorns became common substitutes. These improvised drinks provided a bit of comfort during those years of hardship, showing how families, found ways to maintain their rituals even when the real ingredients were gone. Raisins, prunes and dates were commonly stored for their long shelf life and concentrated energy. Dried fruit could sweeten breads, porridges and puddings when sugar was in short supply, and they provided essential vitamins in otherwise limited diets. Families knew that having even a small amount of dried fruit could, break the monotony of daily meals. While fresh produce didn't store for years, certain hardy vegetables could last through winter when cellared properly. Cabbage, turnips, potatoes and carrots became the backbone of many wartime meals. Families would store them in cool, dark basements or earthen mounds, ensuring a steady supply of food even during months of shortages. Canning was really a household art during the Second World War. Families would preserve fruit as jams and chutneys, while vegetables were pickled or even fermented. Glass jars filled with preserves lined the shelves, providing bursts of flavour and nutrition throughout the year. And vinegar-based pickling also created foods that could last for months without spoiling. Cooking fats were, honestly, quite difficult to come by, and so households learned to treasure every single drop. Lard, dripping and margarine were stockpiled whenever possible. Not only did they provide vital calories, but fat also helped preserve cooked foods. A layer of fat poured over cooked meat, for example, sealed it from air and kept it edible for longer. Imported foods were limited, but pasta and rice were absolutely prized when they were available. Both were easy to store, lightweight and capable of stretching small amounts of meat or vegetables into a full meal. A single pound of rice, you see, could feed a family for days when combined with beans or broth. Vinegar served as both a flavouring and a preserving agent. Families stockpiled it to pickle vegetables, marinate meats and create sauces. Its long shelf life and versatility made it an essential wartime staple, ensuring that even the plainest meal could be preserved or improved. Though not beloved for their taste, hardtack and dry biscuits were durable, long-lasting sources of calories. Originally military staples, civilians also learned to bake their own hard biscuits that could be stored in tins for months. They became emergency backups when other foods ran low. Chocolate wasn't just a luxury, it was morale in solid form. Families stored cocoa powder and chocolate bars whenever they could find them. Beyond the comfort factor, cocoa provided energy and could be mixed into drinks or baked goods to make meagre rations feel special. Looking back at these 15 foods reveals just how resourceful families became when faced with scarcity. They stored what lasted, preserved what they could, and adapted recipes to stretch everything further. Many of these same foods, flour, beans, canned meats, powdered milk, salt, honey, vinegar, remain central to modern prepping and survival strategies. The conditions may be different today, but the principles are unchanged. Resilience begins in the pantry. Stockpiling wasn't about hoarding luxuries, it was about creating security in a world where tomorrow's supply was never guaranteed. Families who mastered this balance endured rationing and shortages with greater strength. For anyone looking at food security today, these lessons are as practical as they were 80 years ago. If you found this deep dive into wartime food strategies valuable, don't forget to subscribe to In the Beginning and share this with fellow history enthusiasts. Every overlooked corner of World War II tells a story, not just of battles and generals, but of the everyday resilience that kept families alive.